Monday, 12th of July, or excuse me, Tuesday, the 12th of July, 2016. And it is 7:38 p.m. I am at the Applebee's restaurant in Canyon Park, Washington. Make some notes here concerning gang stalking in my case. This gang stalking going on, in my case, for a minimum of 14 plus years. And has become increasingly developed over those years. Those who I first met were, and are some of them still involved in this. I met in Renton, Washington, around that time. Some have died. I can mention names. One who has probably died, he's at least disappeared. His name is Dwayne Buxton. And that man introduced me to his friends, Nancy and Kevin Smith. At a later time, as I was around these people, after being kind of, shall we say, hooked into their network, finally, one day, Nancy and Kevin Smith, Nancy being the daughter of David Langley of Seaside, Oregon, so formerly Langley, that particular Nancy Smith, they admitted that they belonged to an organization they called Skull and Bones. They admitted this during a time that I was working with a man named Bob Warren. Bob Warren is still around. He is one of the gang stalkers, as were Nancy and Kevin Smith and Buxton and others. Many others. Untold numbers. I can't count. It's way too impossible. But the factor that ties them together is corruption in the military-industrial complex in the United States of America. And others that involved this cult/racketeering. Very powerful group, very entrenched within the military-industrial complex of the United States of America, and very I see now, as I'm sitting here, one of the perps that I've seen in the past activating, beginning to have the over-animated hand gesturing that is so often employed to force the attention of the targeted victim toward the perps, with the purpose of controlling the targeted victim. This is one of the hooks that it uses. One of the, I like to refer to it as when they're trying to link to the targeted victim in order to gain control over the target at any given time. I like to refer to it as a carrier wave. And then the modulation begins after the target is linked, is tuned in. And the modulation is variation in the patterning, the known patterning known by perps and targets. When they begin to modulate, to vary the intended commands given by the perps become apparent. Look for the modulation, listen for it, and observe for it, and you will determine the intended result intended by the perps, behind the scene perps. So going back now, I haven't mentioned Bob Warren. Bob Warren met one summer in the West Seattle area. I was out scouting for awning cleaning business. I had been down to Alki. Then I was up at a bicycle surfing supply store there along California Avenue. And Bob introduced himself and asked me to get together with him, do some work with him. So I did. And over time, as I got to know him in 2004, the year 2004, I began to realize this man was into the occult and into some sort of covert operations in the United States military, and that he was outwardly very mild-mannered, inwardly very, very dangerous and evil. He has a pretty good cover. But those that get close to him begin to realize over time what he really is. So we did some jobs together, and he did pay me. But he also used coercive tactics and began to reveal the fact that he was associated also with the same government mafia that was called Skull and Bones by Kevin and Nancy Smith. And he began to be rather intimidating. In fact, during this time frame, I had mentioned that there was this government mafia called Skull and Bones. They called herself Skull and Bones. I'd mentioned this to certain friends of mine, one being Alex Varga, Shandor Varga. And I had said, it's a government mafia. Well, lo and behold, a few days later, not very many, I was with Bob Warren, working, and he brought up the subject. He hadn't been in my presence or Alex's presence to hear what I had said, but he knew.
You good?
Yeah. And he very mockingly said to me, and directly, as we were waiting for the ferry to go do some work in Silverdale, Washington, for a man named Mr. Lee, who was a rather rich man apparently and powerful area. I learned. Anyway, he turned to me and he said, yes, it's with this arrogant voice. Yes, it's the government mafia. What are you going to do about it? Here he was admitting guilt, and yet saying, hey, I don't care. This is what I want to do, and I'm with a very powerful group, and what can you do? So this is the attitude of people within this cult / mafia, racketeering. very religious. That's another thing. Occult religious. At any rate, so I still did a little bit of work for Bob after that, but I was getting really uncomfortable. And so it got worse. One day, Bob Warren, when I was with him in his truck there in Factoria, we were stopped at the Bank of America. And Bob, for some reason, had been talking about Asian mafia and bringing it up in kind of a subtle yet threatening way. And he got out of the truck to go do something at the Bank of America there. And I started to notice around me all these Asians walking around. And then I noticed them exchanging things, and I was getting rather intimidated. Well, on the same occasion, Bob Warren said something rather horrible to me. He was talking about my girlfriend at the time, and he called her his pussy. In other words, his sex object. Yeah, that Bob Warren. It's a very, very evil group of people. Anyway, needless to say, it wasn't too long before I totally ditched him out of my life. That isn't the sort of person one stays around.
Oh, really?
But it wasn't easy. He tried to get a hold of me. He tried. To no avail. There's no way I would return any of his phone calls. So then, over time, I learned later that this particular Bob Warren was known by some of my friends. How so? Well, this Bob Warren is the man who cares for the awning at McCory's on the Slough in Woodinville, Washington, a place that I know many people from. And the ones that knew him well enough realized he was a problem. And I discussed what had happened with him, with them, and they believed me, knowing his character. Anyway, so during the final days of working with Bob, I remember one time down on Dravis Avenue, I think it is, it was Dravis Street in the Fremont district, at any rate, close to where I attended technical school at ITT, Peterson School of Business. And next door to Zeke's Pizza, we were cleaning an awning. And we stopped into Zeke's Pizza to bit. Well, this was in 2012. All of this was this portion with him. And my girlfriend at the time, her name was Susan Pack. Anyway, there's more to that too, which I need to add as background, because she was also harassed during this time. At least the pattern indicated that. People would pass her on the freeway, kind of cut her off, and a lot more than usual at that time. Things like that, irritating things were happening. And I concluded that, she's being harassed too, close to me. Susan was a Hungarian citizen at that time. She's now in America. And I understand a bank manager. So she's doing very well. At any rate, back to Bob Warren on Dravis Street, close to Nickerson there. On that occasion, Bob Warren brought up dollar amounts, dollar figures. And he kept saying them and talking about some attorney and different things and increasing multiples. He started out with or $20, $200, up to $2,000. That's $2,000. He said. And then finally he said that's $20,000. I felt really intimidated. Again, like he was demanding payment of $20,000. And he brought up certain other subjects as well that showed that he was clearly associated with Kevin and Nancy Smith. And Nancy Smith, during the same time frame, demanded $20,000 from me. So this is the racketeering, very clear racketeering aspect of this case, and it needs to be thoroughly documented. Much of it is, because some of these rogue elements, rogue agents, shall we say, many actually have discussed it, have mentioned to me my file. What file? Well, this is a government mafia file on me, put together by corrupt people within the military-industrial complex of the United States of America. I remember back in that time frame too, maybe just a little later. Actually, it was a little later. I was in Bremerton, and I was with Tibor Mate, M-A-T-E, commonly known as Bigfoot, and we stopped into a cafe. Well, we ate there, and while I was there was a young man with a lady. They were military. I talked to the young man because I figured out this was part of that group too. And he had been recruited. I actually talked to him about it, to be a part of it, and he knew who I was. We'd never met in my life. I don't remember. I didn't get much about him other than it was a young man, and he felt it an honor to meet me. Well, the lady was very upset that he talked to me. He was under her auspices. And she mentioned my file too. Anyway, and not with kind words toward me. She couldn't stand me, but because she was one of the perps and had access to my file there in some military base not far from there. It was very clear. In the Bremerton area. Bremerton, Washington. Well, there's a lot of military activity goes on out there. So, surprise, surprise. But that's where part of the corrupt element is embedded. Now, my file is traceable. Somebody's going to find that and get it. And I'm waiting for that day. It's going to come out. And it's going to be quite the eye-opener. That's for sure.